Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the InnerViews. In today's video, we're going to get back to Euro 2020 qualifiers and break down how Holland overcame Northern Ireland. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. But now, let's quickly look at the starting lineups. We look at Holland 4-3-3 as expected. Bergwijn, Memphis Depay, and Ryan Babel up front. And in midfield, De Jong, and Wijnaldum. Then we move to Northern Ireland, 4-1-4-1, Lafferty up front with Seville and Dallas out in the wider roles, and in midfield, Davis, Corey Evans, and Paddy McNair. So now, let's look at the first half, see how both sides look to approach the game, and why Northern Ireland caused Holland so many problems. So when we break down Holland against Northern Ireland, the key here was how we're Holland going to break down an organized Northern Ireland side that would look to sit off a bit deeper away from home and try to gain at minimum a point. When we do look to the board, we have Northern Ireland in their base shape, 4-1-4-1 without the ball. And the way that they looked to stop Holland from getting into great positions was clogging the central zones, keeping narrow, ensuring that Holland couldn't play in those tight spaces between the lines. When we look at it, what happens here is that you have the wider players in Dallas and in Saville often looking to close down Blind and Dumfries when they got on the ball. However, when they weren't on the ball, they were very narrow, and what happened here was that you often saw Frankie de Jong dropping off into deeper zones to get on the ball. What we saw initially was that Lafferty was stepping to one center back, and then we would have Paddy McNair, who was tasked with man-marking Frankie de Jong, to step forward. So you have de Jong stepping to Paddy McNair, you have Lafferty stepping to the center backs, and then eventually dropping off. And when you really look at it, the center backs were the only players that really had time on the ball in that opening half. Van Dijk was looking to play long balls over the top, and we'll get to that in a bit. De Ligt struggled to play balls between the lines, and they often got intercepted. There were two in particular where Ferguson and Evans were able to pick those passes out. And then when you look in the midfield, initially from a base shape, you should see Northern Ireland matching up well. It should be Paddy McNair against de Jong. It should be Davis against De Roon. And Wijnaldum, who was the more advanced midfielder, should be dealing with Corey Evans. However, here we saw something different from Northern Ireland. What we saw was that de Jong, like I said, was tasked with McNair tracking him across the pitch. But we often saw De Roon drop off into deeper positions along the same wavelength as de Jong. So when he drops off into those spaces, what we ended up seeing was that the marker in Davis never stepped to him. Davis kept in line with Corey Evans, who was marking Wijnaldum. And why did he do that? Well, the reason that he did that is because Memphis Depay is renowned for dropping off into space between the lines to pick up the ball and then turn and run towards goal. So if you end up having Corey Evans stepping to De Roon there, that allows space, if Holland move the ball quickly, for Memphis Depay to drop off into that space, receive the ball and break forward, because that now creates a 2v1 with Memphis Depay and Wijnaldum around Corey Evans. So Davis often kept his shape, and Memphis couldn't really offer any sort of threat in that central zone. And even when Memphis stayed higher or moved out to the flanks and Bergwijn tried to drop into that space, it never really worked. However, that did mean that it allowed De Roon space to get on the ball. In the earlier stages, we did see Saville move a bit narrow to step to him, and what would happen there is when De Roon played it to the free man and Dumfries, he would step out and shoot out to Dumfries, and that would allow Lafferty space to drop off and then cover out De Roon. And with that being said, sometimes as the game wore on, Lafferty would drop off and sit on De Roon, and that would allow Saville to keep his narrow position, and they were tight and compact in those areas. On the flip side, when De Roon did step into more of a central zone, that would allow Davis to step to him, but for the most part, he dropped off into deeper positions, not looking to pull Davis out, and when you try to pull Davis out, Saville or Lafferty did do a good job there. There is one example in particular to show how they were able to really cope with the threat of Saville tucking into De Roon with Dumfries as a spare man. What we end up seeing here is that you have Saville stepping out to De Roon, and you have De Ligt shifting the ball out to Dumfries. Once the ball is shifted out to Dumfries, we end up seeing Saville step to Dumfries. He steps there, and now De Roon is the spare man. When he plays the ball into De Roon, then we see Davis step. That now allows space for Memphis Depay to drop into, and he does tuck in ahead of Evans once that ball is played to De Roon. When De Roon plays it back to Dumfries, like I said, Memphis comes across, and he ends up shifting into that left-handed zone. And when he shifts into that left-handed zone, what happens there is that Ferguson steps to him. We end up having Bergwijn marked out by Johnny Evans, and when Wijnaldum shifts over, Evans is there. Corey Evans is also there. So that's how they cope with that shape. That's how they ensure that there's no overload. And like I said, even if you have Corey Evans or Davis out of position and Memphis were to drop, because that could be the case, or Bergwijn, you would have Johnny Evans or Cathcart being able to step forward to ensure that there is pressure on the ball, because with Memphis out of position, there's no one for those two center backs to occupy, and one can gamble and step into those positions, because that is how Holland were trying to approach the game. They had Memphis dropping off into deeper positions. Bergwijn was playing a bit narrow, sometimes ahead of Ferguson, sometimes ahead of Johnny Evans, and looking to find space on the ball and creating an avenue for Dumfries to push forward. And you often had Ryan Babel looking to get across Smith or peel off in behind him. So that's how you look at it. Northern Ireland were great without the ball. They didn't really offer any sort of threat going forward, but without the ball, they ensured that Holland struggled to create chances, because when we look to the chances they do create, a lot of it just stemmed from long balls and trying to get in behind the fullbacks, which does make sense. We saw Van Dijk try to play a ball over Smith earlier on, and Babel ran off him, and Smith did well to recover and clear his lines. And later on in the half, we had Van Dijk from deep clipping the ball over Ferguson for Bergwijn to keep in. When Bergwijn keeps it in at the touchline, he pulls it back for Dumfries, and the closest player to him is Evans. What Dumfries does locate is Blind running off Dallas, and when he runs off Dallas, the cross is played into him, but his pullback is blocked by Smith, who does clear his lines. But you're seeing that they're trying to get the fullbacks to deliver crosses into the back post for runners to play off the fullbacks, and if not the fullbacks who are being pulled in narrow, it is to run in off Dallas or off Saville. When we continue to look at other chances, we had Dumfries from a deeper position again delivering a deep cross into the box, and this time it was over Smith for Babel, but he couldn't control the ball well, and he played it back into the path of Wijnaldum at the edge of the box, but his shot was blocked by Dallas, and then ended up falling to Blind, who fired a shot wide. And one more opportunity that we do look at, this time it was De Jong finally getting across McNair and getting across Corey Evans to slide the ball out again to Blind running off Dallas. So Blind running off Dallas is a big problem, because Blind is a quality crosser of the ball and he can't find markers. And what he ended up doing here was he found Wijnaldum running across Cathcart, but he can only flick his effort into the path of the keeper. So when we look at the first half and we really assess it, Northern Ireland did force Holland to push out into the wider areas, but what we do have to say is that Northern Ireland were struggling to cope with those crosses despite stifling the midfield, ensuring that Memphis couldn't get on the ball and ensuring that De Jong couldn't run the game. So we looked at the second half, the pattern of the match didn't really change. Besides a Bergwijn individual run in transition, we did see Wijnaldum sky an effort over their net, but besides that, the only real chance that we saw Holland create prior to some significant changes was when De Roon had the ball in a deeper position and he slid the ball out to Babel, who was drifting out into that left-hand zone. He wasn't marked tightly in that left-hand zone, and what ended up happening by Smith, and what ended up happening there was that with Saville stepping out into the path of De Roon, what we ended up seeing was that we had Dumfries making a late run in behind, and with Memphis peeling off Ferguson and dragging him across into a narrow position in the box, we saw Babel deliver a cross into the path of Dumfries. Luckily for Northern Ireland, Saville did recognize that he was caught out of position, and he tracked well and got across the ball before Dumfries could make connection with it. And that was arguably their best opportunity in those opening 15 minutes prior to the changes. We did see Malen come on for Babel. We did see Van der Beek come on for De Jong, but that didn't really change the game either. What we did see often was that now Memphis would often drift out into a left-hand position, and we would see Malen play through the center, and they did interchange as the match was going on. And we also did see the fact that Magennis came on for Lafferty. But besides that, the only example that we can really notify where Holland got into a good position was when De Jong was able to skip past McNair and square the ball into the path of Memphis dropping off. Memphis then locates Bergvin running off Smith, running off Dallas and Cathcart to clip the ball over them. And when he receives the ball in left half space, he can only direct it on goal, and the keeper was able to push it away. However, we did see Northern Ireland take the lead from a simple mistake from Holland, or two simple mistakes. It stems from a throw-in. We have Ferguson throwing the ball into McNair, and he plays it back into the path of Ferguson. His front post cross should be cleared by De Ligt, but he makes a meal of it and clips it into the path of Blind, who also doesn't control it at the far post, and it allows Dallas to get onto the ball. Dallas now wins that individual battle with Blind at the byline, and when he clips the ball into the box, it flies over Cillessen, and we do see Magennis tower over De Ligt to nod his effort into the net. Northern Ireland are up 1 goal, and they should have made it 2 minutes later when we do see De Jong being dispossessed in midfield by Davis, who is now free to run at the back 4, and he slides the ball out wide into the path of Dallas, who delivers a good cross through the 6-yard box, but De Ligt does a good job of shielding off Magennis to ensure that he can't double Northern Ireland's lead. Frankly, for Holland, the game really changed when they brought on Luuk de Jong and moved to a 3-4-1-2. We had Dumfries sacrificed and Blind moved out to a left center back role, and what we end up seeing now was Malen and de Jong in the central forward positions. We had Frankie de Jong a bit deeper, and what happened was that in the wing back roles, we had Memphis and we had Bergvin, 2 players that can run at you, and it ensured that they were looking to push for the goal, and they had more offensive players in that attacking zone. The other key factor here was that de Jong now can occupy both center backs with his presence because of his aerial threat, and that was something that Holland couldn't provide in the opening 75 minutes of that match with Memphis Depay occupying that zone. So when we look to the first goal, it was poor defending from Northern Ireland, but perhaps it was fatigue as they slowly stopped closing down markers. We had McNair stepping to de Jong, but what happened there is that he was able to slide the ball out to Blind, and Dallas didn't step to Blind. So Dallas didn't step to Blind, and Malen shifts out to the left, and he's able to easily get a poked pass from Blind. This time, Smith doesn't step out to Malen. And what we end up seeing here is Memphis, who swapped positions with Malen, running off Evans, as Evans now shifts over towards the ball. And with Cathcart, the only center back in the box free, what we ended up seeing was de Jong was occupying Johnny Evans and Ferguson. So that is where Luuk de Jong plays a key role. He occupies those 2. And what we end up seeing here is with Evans shifting across and not tracking Memphis's run, Malen's able to deliver a square low cross into the box, and Memphis takes his first touch around Cathcart and pokes a superb effort past the keeper, and that was how Holland was able to score their equalizing goal. Shortly after that, we do see Thompson replace Saville, and we do see another Holland chance. We have de Jong on the ball, and he is stepped to by Davis, and he slides the ball out to Blind, who ends up playing it into the path of Memphis, again down that left-hand side. With no markers really getting tight to him, what we end up seeing is we have Luuk de Jong and we have Wijnaldum in higher positions darting into the box across the center backs to pull them out of position. And what we end up also seeing is that Malen runs off Corey Evans. So when Memphis slides that ball into the box, we have Malen making an unmarked run into the box, and he should do better to knot his effort past the keeper, but even running off Evans and getting a free header in the box, he nods it inches wide of the net. But it goes to show you that Holland are finding a lot of joy down that left-hand side, and it did see Northern Ireland make another change. They ended up taking off Corey Evans and bringing on Flanagan and moving to a back three, which eventually was a back five. So now they were a 5-4-1 without the ball, and that kind of made it a bit harder, although it does ensure that they have more protection of the box with De Jong, who was offering a big role for Holland with Malen. Now they have 3v2 up front, but in midfield they were a bit light. So you have De Jong and you have Van der Beek pushing higher and Wijnaldum pushing higher. And the build up to the goal just summed up that when they made that tactical change, they weren't sure how to cope with the threat of Holland's onslaught. We have De Jong again unmarked, drifting forward, and he slides the ball out to Bergwijn, who is a bit higher on the left-hand side. He is ahead of Dallas, and what happens now is that Dallas should be stepping to him. But what we do see is that we see Bergwijn play the ball back to De Jong, and that pulls out Dallas, and now we have De Jong play it back to Bergwijn, and Smith doesn't get tight. So Smith doesn't get tight there, and we end up seeing Bergwijn's cross into the box, attacked by Malen at the front post, and Thompson ends up nodding it back into the path of De Jong, who is running off Ferguson. Luuk de Jong does get onto it, but he guides the ball upwards, but it does float ahead of the box on the line. So when it floats onto the line, all De Jong really has to do is just get a piece of contact on it, and he does direct the ball into the net. But again, it's the system change. Not the fact that Northern Ireland went to a 5-man backline, but the fact that Holland shifting to a 3 got the more direct threats out in the wider zones in Bergwijn and Memphis Depay, and the fact that they brought on Luuk de Jong, who offered a threat with his aerial presence, and the center backs were now occupied, and he was involved in both of their goals. And we look to the final goal they do score, it's just another mistake. Davis is pressed by Wijnaldum, and he does play a poor pass in midfield that De Jong does intercept, and Frankie does skip past Davis, and with Luuk de Jong ahead of Smith, he's able to slide the ball out to Memphis, making a run in left half space, and he doesn't make a mistake there, and he slides his effort past the keeper. But when you break down the game as a whole, Northern Ireland's setup was superb. They stifled Holland in central areas. They limited their ability to create chances, and it forced Holland to make a tactical change. However, even with Northern Ireland taking the lead, their energy levels dipped. They weren't closing down efficiently, and with De Jong offering a center forward presence, with Malen playing off him and Wijnaldum making runs into the box, it freed up space for other players to get in advanced positions like Memphis Depay, and that was what ended up changing the game. And the only question you could ask is why it took Ronald Koeman so long to make that tactical shift. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think Holland now are favorites to jump ahead and stay ahead of Northern Ireland in their Euro 2020 qualifying group? And what about Northern Ireland? Are they good enough to feature in this summer's competition and make an impact? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.